The moon was hiding behind thick clouds, and the cold wind was moving slowly through the old trees. The leaves were making a soft rustling sound, as if they were whispering secrets from another world. At the edge of a small village, there was an old graveyard. People in the village always avoided that place, especially after sunset. They said strange things happened there at night. Some claimed they heard footsteps when no one was around. Others said they heard crying voices coming from the graves. But one night, something happened that the villagers would never forget. It started with a young man named Ali. Ali was known in the village for being brave. He never believed in ghosts or supernatural stories. Whenever people talked about spirits or haunted places, Ali would laugh and say that it was all just imagination. One evening, Ali was sitting with his friends near a small tea shop in the village. The old shopkeeper was telling them stories about the graveyard again. He spoke in a slow voice, warning them not to go near it after dark. Ali smiled and shook his head. "Ghosts don't exist," he said confidently. "People scare themselves with stories." One of his friends looked at him and said, "If you're so brave, then go to the graveyard tonight." Everyone laughed, but the challenge had already been made. Ali stood up and said, "Fine. I'll go there tonight and prove there is nothing to fear." The villagers tried to stop him. Even the old shopkeeper looked worried. He leaned forward and said quietly, "Some places are better left alone." But Ali didn't listen. Late that night, when the entire village was silent, Ali started walking toward the graveyard. The narrow dirt road was empty. The wind had become colder, and the trees were swaying slowly in the darkness. When Ali reached the gate of the graveyard, he stopped for a moment. The old iron gate was rusty and half broken. It made a loud creaking sound when he pushed it open. Inside, the graveyard looked even darker. Old tombstones stood everywhere, some broken and some leaning sideways. Wild grass had grown around the graves, and the air felt strangely heavy. Ali took out his flashlight and started walking deeper inside. At first, everything seemed normal. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Then suddenly, he heard something. A faint sound. It was very soft, almost like someone whispering. Ali turned around quickly and pointed his flashlight behind him. But there was nothing there. He laughed nervously. "It's just the wind," he told himself. But as he continued walking, the strange feeling in the air started growing stronger. A few minutes later, he heard it again. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a sound that made his heart stop for a moment. It sounded like a scream. A long, distant scream. Ali froze. The scream was not loud, but it was filled with pain and fear. He slowly turned his flashlight toward the direction of the sound. The light moved across the old graves, the broken stones, the dark shadows between them. But again, there was no one there. Ali felt a cold shiver run down his spine. For the first time that night, he began to wonder if the villagers were right. The wind suddenly became stronger, and the trees started shaking. The shadows on the ground began to move in strange shapes. Then the scream came again. This time it was closer. Much closer. Ali's heart started beating faster. He looked around, trying to find where the sound was coming from. And then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the graves in front of him looked different. The soil on top of it was moving. Slowly. Very slowly. As if something underneath was trying to come out. Ali stepped back in fear. His flashlight started shaking in his hand. The soil moved again. And then, from the darkness of the graveyard, He heard a voice. A broken voice. Whispering his name. Ali? Ali's breathing became heavy. He looked around, but there was still no one visible. The voice came again. Ali, help me. It sounded like someone trapped deep underground. Ali didn't know what to do. His mind was telling him to run. But his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He slowly walked toward the grave. The soil kept moving. The wind stopped suddenly. The entire graveyard became silent. So silent that Ali could hear his own heartbeat. He stood right in front of the grave now. The flashlight beam fell directly on the moving soil. And then, the ground suddenly cracked open. Something inside the grave moved violently. Ali stepped back in terror. And at that exact moment, a horrifying scream echoed through the entire graveyard. A scream so loud and painful that even the people sleeping in the village far away woke up in fear. But when they looked outside, the night was silent again. And the graveyard looked exactly the same as always. Except for one thing. Ali was nowhere to be seen. The villagers woke up suddenly that night because of the terrifying scream that echoed from the direction of the graveyard. For a few moments, everyone stayed frozen in their homes, listening carefully to the silence that followed. The wind had stopped, the dogs had stopped barking, and even the insects seemed to disappear into the darkness. Old Haji Karim, who lived closest to the graveyard, slowly opened his door and stepped outside. The cold night air touched his face as he looked toward the distant trees that surrounded the old cemetery. Something about the silence felt unnatural. Soon a few other villagers came out of their houses. They gathered near the small tea shop where they usually sat during the evenings. One of them whispered nervously, "Did you hear that scream?" Another man nodded slowly. It came from the graveyard. Suddenly someone remembered Ali. A young boy said quietly, "Ali went there tonight, remember?" The group looked at each other in fear. No one spoke for a moment. Haji Karim sighed deeply and said, "We should wait until morning. No one should go there at night." Everyone agreed. Even the bravest men in the village did not want to enter the graveyard in the darkness. So the villagers returned to their homes, but no one could sleep that night. Meanwhile, inside the graveyard, something strange was happening. Ali slowly opened his eyes. At first everything around him was dark. His head was spinning, and he could barely remember what had happened. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy. Then slowly his memory returned. The moving grave. The voice calling his name. The ground cracking open. And that terrifying scream. Ali sat up quickly, breathing heavily. He looked around. The graveyard was still there. But something was different. The fog had become thicker, covering the ground like a white blanket. The moon had finally appeared from behind the clouds, but its pale light made the graveyard look even more frightening. Ali noticed his flashlight lying on the ground a few feet away. He grabbed it quickly and turned it on. The beam of light moved across the graves. Everything looked normal again. The grave that had been moving earlier was now completely still. Ali stood up slowly. Was it just a nightmare, he whispered to himself. But deep inside his heart, he knew that what he saw was real. He began walking toward the gate of the graveyard. His only thought now was to leave this place as quickly as possible. But after a few steps, something stopped him. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the soil. Ali pointed the flashlight toward them. They were strange. Very strange. The footprints looked human, but they were too long and too deep, as if something very heavy had walked there. Ali followed the trail of footprints with his light. They were leading toward the center of the graveyard. Ali's heart started beating faster again. "Someone must be here," he said quietly. He took a few careful steps forward. Suddenly he heard another sound. This time it was not a scream. It was a slow dragging noise, like something being pulled across the ground. Ali turned his flashlight toward the sound. The beam moved slowly across the graves, across the broken stones, across the tall grass. Then it stopped. Ali's hand began to shake. Because standing between two old graves was a dark figure. It was tall. Very tall. Its back was facing Ali. Its body looked thin and twisted, and its arms were hanging unnaturally long at its sides. Ali tried to speak, but no words came out. The figure was completely still. Then suddenly, it started moving. Very slowly. Its head turned halfway, as if it had heard Ali breathing. Ali felt his entire body freeze. The flashlight beam was now directly on the figure. And that was when Ali saw something that made his blood turn cold. The figure had no face. Just a dark empty shape where the face should have been. Ali stepped backward in horror. A dry whispering voice filled the air. "Why did you come here?" Ali wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. The creature slowly turned its entire body toward him. Its long arms stretched slightly forward. The wind suddenly returned, blowing violently through the graveyard. The trees started shaking again. And the whispering voice came once more. "Leave before it wakes." Ali's mind raced with fear. "What wakes?" he shouted. For a moment the creature stood completely still. Then it slowly lifted one long arm and pointed toward a large grave in the far corner of the cemetery. That grave looked older than all the others. The stone on top of it was cracked. And something about it felt terribly wrong. Ali stared at it, confused and terrified. But before he could ask anything else, the creature suddenly disappeared. Just like that. One moment it was standing there. The next moment, it was gone. Ali looked around wildly, trying to find it. But the graveyard was empty again. Only the wind and the moving trees remained. Then suddenly, from the direction of the old grave, the ground began to shake. Slowly. Very slowly. And a deep sound started rising from underneath the earth. A sound that no human should ever hear. Ali realized something terrible. Something far worse than ghosts was about to wake up beneath the graveyard. And he was standing right above it.